Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are toppling tuplets again. And this is part two of the tuplet definition. And specifically, we're going to look at the second half of the tuplet definition dialog box down here, which has all to do with positioning. And the first part of this is we have an option here for tuplet and horizontal and vertical, and there's two fields here. And this will actually move the tuplet in relation to the notes. Now the horizontal value, if you put a negative number here, will move the tuplet to the left, positive will move it to the right. And with the vertical, positive numbers will go farther away from the notes, and negative numbers will get the tuplet closer to the notes, right? So in this case, if I were to enter negative 0.1 in the horizontal, you'll see the tuplet move off to the left a little bit there. Even zoom in a little bit more. You can see that. And again, if we add more vertical to this value here, let's say 0.15, you'll see that it gets even farther away, right? If we do negative 0.15 and we do positive 0.1, you'll see it go to the right and downwards. And again, with tuplets that are below, again, more positive value here. If we put negative 2, we'll get it further away, all right? So that's just how that works. And let me just reset. The one thing about the positioning in regards to the tuplets is that there is no way to adjust the distance between the tuplet itself and the staff line when we have the avoid staff option checked, right? I wish there was. There should be like a third option here for a vertical adjustment above the staff line when avoid staff is checked, but there is not, so we're kind of stuck without too much control over that. And the weird thing about this is that if you were to go into the tuplet and start dragging it, nothing's going to happen for a while until you get to a certain point, and then it will start going above. And it's not that nothing's happening, but what is happening is a little bizarre because basically what you're trying to do is overcome the difference in the distance between where the tuplet would be above the beam to where it is when it's avoiding the staff, right? So again, you can see that I'm moving a bunch up and down and nothing's happening until I overcome that difference, and then it will start going away because now this value is actually, what is this value now? 0.37153. That is actually 0.31753 away from the beam, which is higher than where it would normally be if it was just avoiding the staff, if that makes sense. It is a little unfortunate. I wish there was another option that would allow us to, adjust this a little bit further away or closer to the staff lines, as it were. But alas, there is not. Below those tuplet position options, we have a checkbox here for center number using duration. Now, there's a school of thought with tuplets where the number itself should be centered on the duration, not necessarily centered visually. In this case, and you see in this fourth measure, this 3 right here is definitely centered visually on this triplet, right? But the actual duration of this tuplet, the center is somewhere over here near this eighth note, right? I think more often than not, you would want to see it centered visually, but you can center it durationally if you have that option checked, and you'll see what happens. Now the 3 gets moved all the way over to basically the center of the duration of this tuplet, all right? So that option is available if you want it. Let me just reset that. Below the center number using duration option, we do have something called ignore horizontal number offset. Now this has to do with something in the document options for tuplets, down here tuplets. This has to do with this horizontal number offset. And I did some digging into this the other day, and I discovered that this whole functionality is a little bit buggy. What's supposed to be happening with this offset number is it should only apply to tuplets that don't have brackets. And the reason for that, and there's a value that places it to the right or the left when the note doesn't have a bracket. And the reason for that is because when you have, in this case, in this second bar, when you have a tuplet that has a beam like this, normally the tuplet would get centered on the note, the middle note in this case, on this A. But if it was there, it would appear to be a little off center from the entire beam. So that offset, that horizontal offset, allows you to set that that number to center within the beam itself, right? So again, if we were to actually ignore horizontal number offset here, you can see how that 3 would move over to center itself on that middle note, which doesn't quite look right, right? However, like I said, it is a little buggy because that horizontal offset number with the upstem values also offsets tuplets that have brackets, which is wrong. I think it's a bug. And if you look very closely at this very first tuplet here, this triplet, you may notice this. This 3 is actually centered more closer to the stem than it is centered of this note. And you can see that the left side of the bracket is slightly longer than the right side of the bracket. This shouldn't be the case. And you see on the lower tuplet here, it is actually more centered in the bracket. Again, I think this is wrong, but if you're somebody that really pays attention to this finite of a detail, going in here and choosing to ignore the horizontal number offset for this particular tuplet will fix that, right? Again, I believe it's a bug, and actually recently I just emailed Make Music to see if that's if they can confirm that, and I don't know if they'll ever fix it, but it is what it is. All right. Now, below the ignore horizontal offset option, there is another set of values here for the shape. And this window is a little bit confusing, the design of it. This first box is, again, the horizontal. The second box is the vertical. They just didn't restate horizontal and vertical here, but that's what that is. And in the case of the shape, you would be moving the bracket or the slur, if you have slur selected, left or right or up or down, the same way it works here. Except the number itself wouldn't move. So if actually we put in a negative 0.2 value here, you'll see that the whole bracket gets moved, but the 3 remains where it was, right? And same thing with the vertical. Let's make that 0.1 for positive. Go to the right, make that 0.1, and you'll see the whole bracket go up and to the right like that. All right. So that's just a different method of moving that bracket around. It could possibly be handy if you've got some fonts that you're using for your tuplets that are interfering too much with your bracket. You could set some small numbers here, and that might help fix that. Okay. And below that, we do have an option for always flat tuplets, and I'll just check these tuplets that have an angle by default. Below the shape positioning, you'll see always flat, and if you check that, it will very logically make the tuplets flat, just like that. And again, if you prefer flat tuplets, you can set this in the document options, and then all of your tuplets would end up flat, or you can change a whole bunch of them with the utilities change tuplets function. That's always available to do. And below always flat, we do have an option called bracket full duration. And now, again, there's another school of thought about tuplets where the bracket for the tuplet should extend to encompass the entire duration of that tuplet. So if we have that checked, I'm selecting this half note tuplet here, you'll see what happens. That the bracket gets extended all the way to the right to where the half note triplet here would actually end durationally speaking, right? So that's what that does, and that's available if you want to see that type of tuplet. Reset that. And then below that option, we have something called match length of hooks, and by default, this is usually checked. And what this will do, I think I talked about this a little bit, is it will make sure that the left and right hook length will be exactly the same. And this will be related to these first two options up here, left hook and right hook. Now, if we manually change these numbers here, with this checked, only the left hook value is going to affect the length of the hook. So I could change this right hook value here to 0.5 and nothing would happen to this tuplet, right? And they have different values, but it's taking on the value of the left hook. So if I go back and change that to 0.04167 and then change this one to 0.2, you'll see that both hooks will change. Right, so it's taking on the value of the left hook, regardless of what the right hook value is. If you uncheck that, then we can change these to different numbers. We can change this to 0.1 and make this, 0.1. And actually, a negative number would flip the hook to the other direction. So we can make this negative 0.1 and get a funky looking tuplet bracket that looks like that, right? So that's how that would work. And incidentally, these right hook values will also have an effect on slurred tuplets. So if you have a slur like this, those hook values will change. And particularly with the slur style of tuplets, I do believe that it probably would help to have larger values than what's here, than 0.0416. I think actually maybe 0.15 is a slightly better value. Again, I've got the match length set, so I only need to change the left hook. Yeah, and you'll see that's a little bit better, right? So that is available there as well. And below those left and right hook values, there's an option for, there's some fields that you can add left extension and right extension. And again, with both the left and right, negative numbers will go left, positive numbers will go right. So we could set this to negative 0.1, and you'll see the left side of that tuplet get dragged out to the left, right? And if we go to positive 0.1 for the right extension, you'll see it get extended to the right a little bit, right? If I had reversed those, so let's do positive 0.1 in the left and negative 0.1 in the right, you'll see that the tuplet will get squeezed inside a little bit like that, all right? Again, this could be some minute adjustments you may want to make depending on certain fonts you're using or whatever the case may be. And then finally, let's talk about this manual slope adjustment value, and let's actually look at one of these tuplets that have some slope. Now that's going to be related to the document options. In the bottom right-hand corner, there's something called maximum slope, and it's set to 10, and this is actually an angle. So this number can be anywhere from 0 to 90, and what this is doing is it's setting the maximum angle allowed by the tuplet. So obviously in this case, you know, the tuplet could be angled further to kind of match the contour of the notes a little bit, right? But because the maximum slope is set at 10, it's not allowing that tuplet to do so, right? So again, if we change that to 12, you'll see that it will get a little bit steeper, right? It's not a great idea to have too high of an angle for tuplets. They start to look funky, particularly when they're a little bit more squished together. So somewhere around 10, maybe 12 is a good number. But this, in the individual tuplet definition, this value, manual slope adjustment, is not adding angle. This is actually adding height to the right side of the tuplet, so that the angle would therefore increase by following that value, right? So if we put something like 0.2 here, you'll see the right side get higher. Now, unfortunately, just doing it that way, what happens is that it doesn't change the left side, because in this case, we'd want the left side to go lower so that the number would stay center, right? But if we really wanted to do that, we could change the position of the vertical of the shape, and if we made this negative 0.1 to get a little bit closer, you'll see that it would move it downwards, right? Now, this is all to say that this is sort of an odd way of making that type of adjustment. It's much easier to just grab the handle that's right inside the right hook and make that adjustment that way, because when you move that hook, you're actually changing the slope height and the position of that of the shape itself. And you'll see that when I did that, it filled these fields out right for me. So again, much easier to do that by dragging the handles than by actually changing those numbers, because it's a guess otherwise. And finally, I wanted to talk about one thing that's outside of the tuplet definition dialog box, but it is related to how your tuplets will look in design, and that's the actual font of the number itself can be changed, and that's in the document options in the fonts pane, and we're looking for notation, and we're going to find tuplet. And you'll see that it's set to Times New Roman 10 bold italic, and we can set that to something else if we want. If we wanted to make them bigger, we can do that. And you'll see these will change retroactively. Your tuplets will get a little bit bigger, or the font of the numbers will get a little bit bigger. The one oddity about this, by the way, is that if you have some of these numbers set to show ratios in the number with the rhythmic values, so the XQ to YQ ratio, for example, these particular characters, the quarter note characters in this case, will not change, and we have no ability to change them. Actually, in the document options, there's no there's no font option for that particular character. So we could change the tuplet value. We can make this really big, 24, for example, and you'll see that it will not change the quarter notes themselves in proportion. So that's a little bit odd that we don't have control over that, but not that you'd really want your tuplets to look that big, but you know, it is strange that we can't change that. All right, so that should do it. That's the tuplet definition dialog box and the fonts for your tuplets, and that should cover pretty much everything. I'm going to do one more video on toppling tuplets. I'm going to give you some specific tips for some common tuplet situations that I think are handy. So come back for that, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.